Yes, thank you. With us now to take us through the newspapers this morning, the senior editor at the Novara Media, Ash Sarkar, and Jacob Reynolds from the Academy of Ideas. Welcome back to you both. Starting off with The Guardian and the World Health Organization, their COVID warning. Ash.
So this is a story which is a warning from the World Health Organization that coronavirus might not be the big pandemic, that there might be more severe, more contagious, or indeed more deadly novel viruses coming down the line. And this is something which is deeply connected to our treatments of the environment. So one of the warnings which has come up in the last few months is that as deforestation increases, particularly in Southeast Asia, you're increasing the chances of viruses jumping the species barrier, particularly from bat to human, which is where lots of the novel coronaviruses come from. So we've had the world in an unprecedented way, shut down, economies put into the deep freeze, people, confined to their homes just because of this one coronavirus. And unless we get our healthcare systems in a state of readiness, unless we take vaccine development very seriously, even when there isn't a pandemic on the horizon, and unless we change our relationship to the environment, there might be more severe ones down the line.
To the Telegraph, and the B word is back, Brexit. It's a big day in Parliament.
Yeah, obviously this is the Telegraph going with the other story of the day aside from COVID in terms of the MPs going to vote on the deal that Boris Johnson negotiated, and a deal that looks set to pass Parliament. And lots of the papers actually have gone with trailed a speech by Boris Johnson in which he sort of notes that this has been a torturous process, and that despite that, this is going to sort of mark a new chapter in terms of cooperation and trade with the EU. And he notes the sort of long historical ties that we've had with countries in Europe. And it's obviously good to set things off on a positive note after a difficult negotiating period. But in the sort of detail of these remarks, I'm a little bit kind of disappointed to see that Boris has sort of papered over what is, for many people, really the key thing about Brexit, which is not really about trade, but was this moment where millions of people voted again and again, had their voices heard, made sure that the wish that they expressed in that referendum went ahead and happened, and that the UK became the first country to leave the EU. So this new chapter that Boris talked about, I'd like to see it marked not just by trade and international cooperation, but by a sort of new era of sovereign democratic accountability for people in the UK.
And Ash, the Express, their spread there with Boris Johnson hailing a new chapter, obviously looking at this as a positive, something to embrace.
Well, certainly this marks the end of a kind of 4 years long culture war of Brexit, and that is something to be welcomed. I can't be the only person who's been completely sick of Brexit dominating the headlines. There will, of course, be also a lot of economic disruption. There are lots of businesses here in the UK which rely on the markets in the EU. Some of that will be disrupted. One of the sort of weird positives of the coronavirus crisis is that it's normalised government spending to the point that there will be more wiggle room for the Treasury to offer financial support to those affected businesses as Britain sort of makes its way in a post-Brexit trading environment.
And Jacob, let's move on to the Times and talking about the vaccination programme and just how many would need to be vaccinated to make an inroad into the fight against COVID-19.
Yeah, this news has obviously received a sort of big boost today in the approval of the Oxford AstraZeneca jab. But it doesn't take away, I think, from the key point in this story, which is that the UK really needs to accelerate the rollout of vaccinations. This story in particular might be sort of driven by remarks from Neil Ferguson, who I think we've probably heard enough from already. But the overlying point is of course correct, that we need to accelerate rollout, that this is a huge logistical challenge, notwithstanding the sort of approval of a new vaccine. We need to go out and learn from countries around the world like Israel, who seem to be doing this pretty effectively. And I don't want to take away from the positive news that we've had today with this vaccine, but there's a sort of key point here, which is that the government now needs to start setting out the parameters for how we come out of lockdown. So how many people need to be vaccinated, in which groups, when is that going to happen, how many doses are available, and that kind of detail that is not just a technical point, but is a really key sort of core point about how we come out of the hugely onerous restrictions that we've been under and begin to sort of take back control of our lives and live the kind of lives that we have not been able to live for far too long now.
Ash, to the Mail, and MPs set to rebel over extra holidays. The government plans to give MPs extra holidays.
So this is news from the Commons leader Jacob Rees-Mogg, who announced that the festive recess would go on for about a week longer, because obviously you've got hundreds of MPs across different parts of the country all travelling down to London. In this context where we've got spiralling infection rates, there are worries that that could be quite dangerous. Now, the potential rebellion or stirrings of discontent are coming from sections of the Conservative benches in particular, but also some prominent Lib Dems joining the criticism as well, saying, well, hang on, there's so much important stuff on the agenda. You've got Brexit, of course, but then you've got this matter of tightening Tier 4 restrictions, whether or not schools should return in January. In order for there to be proper legislative oversight, MPs need to be sitting in the Commons. One thing that I don't quite understand is why this is being described as an extension of a festive recess when the same measures for digital voting, for remote parliamentary sittings could take place over this time, which would give you the best of both worlds, legislative oversight and, you know, not having our entire legislative body, infected with coronavirus. But these are arcane parliamentary processes. There are rules which have been in place for absolutely centuries, and they're not inclined to change them now.
Jacob, just time for you to tell us why quitting booze helps the environment. This is in the Mirror.
Well, yeah, this is the traditional New Year's story has been given its sort of mandatory environmental repackaging. To be honest, after a year of restrictions on our lives and restrictions on our pubs, those sort of engines of sociability, which are a huge part of our country, I'll be one of the people certainly jettisoning any of this advice and returning to my local boozer as soon as possible in the new year.
OK, you've got your New Year's resolution down pat there. Ash and Jacob, thank you very much for taking us through the papers. Good to see you.